Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going? Let's get into it.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I was just watching the Andre Karpathy-Dorkesh interview, and one of the questions they was asking was about sort of, AGI or AI's sort of what it's going to do to the GDP statistics in the short to medium run. What is sort of the best way of even thinking about that question in terms of how AI will impact the productivity statistics more broadly?
So it's really interesting. Darren Acemoglu created a very interesting framework for thinking about how AI can affect productivity, and it can replace humans, what everyone talks about, right? It can increase the productivity of humans at their jobs. So you can use AI to just do things faster. Which I'll use AI as a search engine now. I'll just say, like, find me a bunch of papers on this, and it's faster than me searching. And it's not quite as good as me searching. So I'll often do my own search in addition. But then, like, if I just need a quick and dirty, a couple of papers that talk about this kind of thing, it's really good. It can speed up my productivity. It's a decent proofreader too of blog posts. And so there's that. There's AI creating new tasks for people to do. So finding new stuff for us to do. So an example of this, there's this guy Edmund Zagarin that I know. Do you know him?
No.
Edmund, he's doing like AI for predictive maintenance. So you basically put AI little sensors and stuff in every machine, and then AI tells you when the machine is going to break down, so you maintain it, right? So in the old days, you just let the machine break and replace it or whatever. Now you can go and actually do a little thing and fix it. So it creates new jobs for people to do, and then it also can increase the productivity of capital itself. And so actually, his thing could also do that by if you have machines that can work for much longer without breaking down because you're doing the little things to maintain them as you go, then you could have much more productive machines. And so anyway, or if, robots understand better how to like do a thing, you could increase the productivity of capital. So there's all these ways that AI can increase productivity. Darren Acemoglu wrote that he doesn't think any of this is going to happen. He doesn't think it's going to increase productivity at all, but he basically just assumes away all of these things based on stuff he seems to have vaguely read in the news about AI. It's not super well done. And Maxwell Tabarrok, who's just basically a kid, kind of took apart his little paper, and it was not his finest moment, Acemoglu's. But anyway, so we don't really there's many ways that AI can increase productivity. And since ChatGPT came out, we've been seeing a slight acceleration in labor productivity. So remember that there's total factor productivity, which takes capital productivity into account too, which it's very hard to observe because capital productivity is very hard to measure, and also because we don't exactly know how to combine labor and capital productivity to figure out which is which. And this data just comes out with a lag. People talk about it as if total factor productivity is like the thing that drives everything. And over like 100 years, yes, obviously. But over the course of a couple months or a couple of years, like labor productivity growth is much better because we have much better data. And it shows an acceleration. It shows since ChatGPT came out, we're seeing productivity grow faster. And that's good. I'm excited about this. But at the same time, it's early days, right? Like did you read the report about work slop? Did you read that one?
No, I didn't see it.
Oh, it was interesting. So these guys at Harvard Business School basically went out and surveyed a bunch of managers about how AI is affecting work. And they said that it's making the workers worse because they're turning in slop instead of just doing their work. And so then they have to go and recheck, and they don't trust their workers anymore because their workers might be turning in slop. So there is that. And then also MIT did a study that found out that I think something like 95% of companies that implemented AI have seen no productivity increases. But that's early days. And we remember the famous example of electricity, where at the beginning, factory people, like manufacturers, tried to use electricity by simply replacing steam power with an electrical dynamo, to make power, turn these drivetrains for the factories. It didn't work because electricity is in some sense weaker than steam. But then later, 20 years later, everybody figured out how to change the shape of factories so that instead of driving everything on one drivetrain with a big steam power thing, you would have a whole bunch of little workstations powered in parallel by electric wires, and you could carry your work from one station to the next. and apply resources where they needed to be applied instead of doing everything at this uniform same rate. So you could parallelize manufacturing with electricity, which you couldn't do with steam. It's really hard to do with steam. And so because of that, productivity like 5x'd in manufacturing. And it was crazy. It was great. But it took 20 years for them to even have this idea of how to do it. So it's still really early days. And I don't think we know, we're still in this phase of like, rip out the steam, put in the electricity, which didn't work, right? We're still in this phase of like, rip out the human, put in a chatbot phase. And it's not, only once in a while will that actually be effective. Actually, I called an online help thing the other day that was extremely well done. Like, it was extremely good, well implemented, like appointment making service for this one thing. It was great. But I think those are the exception rather than the rule so far. But it's early days, and we're going to find out lots of ways to sort of reorganize our businesses around AI. And it'll take human ingenuity, and I don't know, maybe AI itself can help with that. But then it'll take a lot of ingenuity to figure out how to reorganize our production processes such that AI isn't just slopifying everything, so that it's actually just we find out what AI's magic strengths are that humans can't do in the workplace. That's what I think. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that the models are going to get I'm bullish on the models getting better such that the output isn't just slop. I assume that the work product will get better over time, even that if people are delegating a larger majority to it, that the product gets better. What I don't know, Balaji has this line of like, the AI doesn't do end to end, it does middle to middle. Like, you're still going to need humans to sort of be, quality control for all sorts of things, or like, even if it could do 90% or 99%, it's that 1% or the 10% that's like the most important for so many spaces. So I don't see any mass kind of worker replacement soon, but there should be. I don't think that the slop problem will be an enduring problem on the worker side. What I don't have a model for is like how to think about, why it would be 5% GDP or 10% GDP, like how, what are the most important things that would sort of, guide it one way or the other.
Right.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Hey everyone, make sure to check out the show notes for today's Econ 102 episode. We've organized all the key insights from Noah's rants into an easy to scan cheat sheet format. Our show notes were actually created by Notion's AI meeting notes. It listened to our entire podcast episode, captured a full transcript, and generated a recap of the episode's meaningful takeaways. If you're someone who takes messy notes, forgets what was said in back-to-back meetings all day, or listen to one too many podcasts, you've got to try this feature. And because AI meeting notes lives right in Notion, everything you capture, whether that's meetings, podcasts, interviews, conversations, live exactly where you plan, build, and get things done. No switching, no slowdown. Here's an exclusive offer for our listeners. Head to the link in our show notes to try Notion's AI meeting notes free for 30 days. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 43,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 AI cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one fluid platform with one unified business management suite. There's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions with real-time insights and forecasting. You're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. So if I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to your immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunities, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning for free at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102.
So are you enough of a VC thinkfluencer yet to be able to say like what kind of application layer companies you think are really doing the best, or is that, I know all the like big VCs will hold forth on like, oh, it's this kind of company, like Paul Graham or whoever will hold forth. But are you
Yeah.
are you in that league yet?
I think at a high level, I mean, the code stuff is really taking off
Mm,
across, because it's just like, it's so concrete and definitive that AI there's not like a lossiness there. So, I mean, Cursor
right.
is just absolutely exploding. Anthropic, just the even OpenAI's code product. So that's really the application that is. I mean, all the vibe coding stuff. Although the question with the vibe coding stuff is how is retention. We saw Lovables having had a big growth spurt, but it's unclear. It's slowing down, and it's unclear that a lot of these enterprises that are sort of using these vibe coding products, like will they retain? Replic's the big one in our portfolio. It's doing really well, but in general, code is the best use case. But we're also seeing the vertical application, like a bridge in healthcare at Ambient is crushing it. Harvey in the legal space. We backed a company, at least AI in the real estate space. It's kind of vertical AI workflow applications.
All right. So
Um,
these coding applications, one question is when I talk to people about the AI coding, a problem that almost everyone raises is security and the idea that AI coded stuff will be riddled with security flaws. How effectively has that problem been addressed by now?
I have no idea.
Okay.
That's a good question. Yeah, I've heard that too, but I'm not like the numbers. The usage keeps going up, so I
Mm.
yeah, but so it's not stopping people, but yeah, that is a vulnerability. Um, a lot of these just enterprise workflows are just so like basic that some people are criticize these vertical AI applications that it's really just a ChatGPT wrapper, but with a lot
Mm.
of like customization for the
Yeah.
bureaucracies of these industries. But maybe that's what's needed. Maybe there's just so much bureaucracy that you need a custom, whether it's legal, healthcare, or sort of construction or housing, kind of layer on top of it. But these companies are growing tremendously. I think this relates to your bubble question, which is, does the you know can we justify the capex or the expectations based on this? And from your piece that I just read, it seems like you think it's likely there's going to be a bubble, even if the technology doesn't solve, mostly because customers also has to adopt it. It's just unclear they will, or what
Yeah.
guides your confidence that there will be some bubble?
So bubble's an interesting term because we've become really used to thinking bubbles in terms of financial bubbles, like asset prices, like house prices go up and down, or stock prices go up and down. And while we may see some action in stocks, like we may see Nvidia go up and down, it's not clear that that's. I don't think that's what people are really talking about when they're talking about AI. I think people are talking about a capex boom and bust. I think the term boom and bust is a little better than bubble here because
Yeah.
um, what happened with the railroads and again with the telecoms in the 90s was that people built a lot of stuff and the stuff was all needed and the stuff all got used. It wasn't useless stuff and it wasn't too much stuff. And it actually, within a reasonable time, created a return on investment that justified building it. The telecoms paid off, the railroads paid off. But they didn't pay off quite fast enough for a lot of the companies to pay back their loans. The companies had, I think I was talking to Lockie Groom the other day. You know him, Lockie. I was talking to
Nope.
him, and I said, I realized it just popped out of my mouth. I was like, it is always easier to write a check than to generate physical value. It is always inherently the physical process of writing a check has always been easy, and the physical process of turning that check into real value has always taken a long time. That's been true, in the railroads and, Dutch shipping, finance, telecoms, and whatnot. Like it's always interstates, it's always been true. It's always been quicker and easier to write checks. And so in some sense, for some reason that we don't entirely understand, a lot of times when people write those checks, they write the checks faster than the value can be created. And the loans can't be paid back at first. We don't know why in the initial surge of optimism around a technology, we tend to overloan. We tend to make too many loans, and then there's a bust. But the bust can hurt the economy through the following way. What happens is companies don't pay back their loans to banks. Banks get bad balance sheets. Banks can't lend out as much money. Bank lending slows, the economy slows. So in that sense, it's like 2008. I don't think this will be like 2008, to be clear. But I think that in 2008, what we did see was a whole bunch of mortgage debts went bad, and then banks would stop lending because they had all these bad debts on their books, right? Banks can only lend when they have healthy balance sheets, when their assets are a lot and they're more than their liabilities, right? That's their equity cushion. And so what happened was that in the railroad bust in 1873, and then in the telecom bust in, 2000, what happened was that the real investments that were made with all these loans couldn't generate value fast enough to pay back the loans. They did for some companies, but not for other companies. And those companies went bust. Their loans went bust. The banks had bad loans on their books, and then the bank lending slowed. So we got a minor recession in 2001, major recession in 1873, and then there have been some more instances of this too. But then I guess the upshot here is that this doesn't mean we're creating AI is a bubble makes it sound like AI is useless crap. We're building useless crap, but it's not. Historically, these booms and busts, we're not building useless crap, and all those railroads got used and all those telecom fibers got used in the end. But they didn't get used fast enough to pay off that initial wave of over exuberant loans. And so we had a financial bust from just sort of loans outrunning the real value creation for a while at the beginning. And it's kind of like the Gartner hype cycle. You know this one, right? So it's like we had this peak of exuberance and then the valley of despair. And then we had the plateau of whatever, like sustainable value creation or whatever it's called. I forgot. Plateau of usefulness. I don't remember what it's called.
Trough of sorrow.
There's the trough of sorrow, trough of, and in that trough, everyone's going to say AI is useless bullshit. Look at that. It's never coming back. And they'll say it for about 6 months and then it'll come back. AI is going to work in the future. The technology just works and we don't know exactly how to use it. And there's kinks in the technology and there is no way that's going to be permanent. I do not,
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's interesting to compare this to previous sort of, booms and busts. The internet, because people had questions around like, hey, Google and Facebook, yes, they have all these users, but are they making money? Whereas ChatGPT is interesting, or OpenAI is interesting because one, it's not only is it the fastest growth of all time, but they are making real revenue, like the user revenue, like people are paying for the subscription. It's much higher than it was in Google and Facebook, even today probably, the revenue per user. And so it's hard for me to imagine a world where people are like, oh, AI has no use because the consumer usage is off the charts and people are paying for it. And that's just on ChatGPT, not to mention, Sora, not to mention these coding tools. I do think there's still a chance of a bust because the expectations are so big that, AGI and people are saying this Karpathy interview alone is like, some cold water on the idea that AGI, whatever your definition of AGI is, a few years away. He's saying it's like a decade away. But the CapEx is spent as if there's going to be orders of magnitude more usage already in the next 3 to 5 years. And maybe that won't happen.
What do they mean? I haven't watched the Karpathy thing. I love Karpathy and Dorkesh both, but I just haven't gotten around to watching it because I had conference and so many other things to do. But then my question is, and I went and saw Silicon Valley, the musical also.
Oh, I wanted to see it. Those guys are awesome.
It's quite good. It's quite good. I guess next time they come out with a round of it. But yeah, anyway, so what do they mean by AGI? What are people calling that these days?
I think they mean employment, replacing human labor, basically, or as good enough, et cetera.
Okay, so just where you don't have where complementarity turns into substitutability. So where AI starts becoming more substitutable.
Yep.
For human labor instead of more of a complement to human labor.
Yep.
So maybe I guess that's interesting because I wonder if this could be holding back business models. I wonder if everyone is just not bothering to figure out sneaky, cool ways to use humans and AI together, like we did with electricity and humans, because they think in another few years the AI is going to get so good that all of this won't make any sense and everything will be push button.
Yep.
Do you think that could be happening?
No.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't think that human labor is going to be replacing material way in the short term. And so then the question is, what would need to be true to justify the CapEx that these companies are spending, or the expectations, for all the data centers, et cetera? Where is the usage gonna come from?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so,
is there enough on the consumer side, or does
right.
it have to be, on the business side, et cetera? Because that's going to just be slower.
Right. I mean, the amount that I'm willing to pay AI chatbots to talk to me is going to be, there's a cap on that somewhere. Like a lot of what
Right.
I need is in the physical world.
Yeah.
But on the business side, it's not as capped, because what if AI handles all the insurance? What if AI handles all the law? What if AI handles all this and that? So I feel like it's a lot bigger.
And the example that I think you wrote about it too is radiologists, right?
Yeah.
Because we were like, oh wait, why do we still have radiologists? And it turns out there's no shortage of, in fact, radiologists, maybe their wages will increase or something, or like the radiologist just keeps being the sort of the example that people point to on both sides.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's right. And so, um, I think there's another piece to this here. So we keep talking about the value creation of AI, but the value capture has to be another piece that we talk about. Solar power creates enormous value when everything uses energy, and yet solar power companies make no money. Food. Without food, well, we all die. So food is necessary for all value creation in the world at this point. And yet farmers, unless you support them with various farm subsidies and stuff, will make very little profit. One tomato is as good as another, so they compete their profits away. And you can have specialized farms. We have this awesome farm. You can only get steak from this place. Yeah, sure, you get that. You get some pricing power, but farming is a brutally competitive business. So we allow these big agribusinesses to be almost monopolies, and we allow and we do all these subsidies and protection, things like that, just so farmers won't be vulnerable to going out of business in every downturn and we starve, which is what happened in a lot of historical cases where you had cyclical boom and bust turned into human beings starving. We're like, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to make sure farmers have a profit cushion. And that's been true since the Depression. Farming's a brutal business. Solar's a brutal business. And yet they create so much value, right? Like from energy, from food. These are very basic things that underpin lots of our economy. Someone gave another great example the other day, and I forget what it was, and I can look it up while I'm talking. But then the point is that, what if AI is like that? What if AI is this very commoditized product that is, Anthropic and OpenAI make very little money, but everything's powered by AI, and AI creates all the value in the world. Right? What if that happens? And I can't tell you that it won't. I can tell you that, airlines. That's right. Matt Iglesias suggested airlines. Air travel is really important, and yet airlines really struggle to make money.
Yeah.
And it's undifferentiated, and they all use the same airports. The competition competes the profits away.
Yeah, it's a good question. My guess is that, or initial guess is OpenAI gets better as you these products, as they get more of your information, they will adjust better and become more personalized. I'm trying to think. People are paying, a lot of people are paying right now. OpenAI and Anthropic are printing money. Not profit, of course. The costs are super high, but
they're not printing profit. They're printing money.
Yeah. And their revenue expectation, I don't see. It seems like the default is that customers are willing to pay for this. So why would they stop? For example, if I'm on ChatGPT is getting way better because it knows me. It has my history, my medical history. It's all the things I'm typing into it. Am I all of a sudden going to switch to Anthropic because Anthropic's models are better? I doubt it.
No,
And
but
so,
what if OpenAI starts trying to charge you $200 a month?
um, well, they are with the deep research, right? But yeah, meaning if they start to, there's
Yeah.
some limit to what we're
How
willing
many
to pay.
people do you think are going to pay AI $200 a month?
That's a good question.
So,
I don't know.
because the thing is that another lab can undersell them. And when you're talking about it learning about you with your personal data, that's interesting. Like that could be a moat. I don't think it has not demonstrated that capability to me. Like it doesn't seem to learn from the things it's talked to me about, and that's a lot of stuff to search through and a lot of. I'm sure maybe we'll get that better in the future, but then right now I feel like the AI products are, if not interchangeable, at least close enough where I'm not going to pay a huge premium for one over the other.
Yeah.
And I think why aren't these companies profitable? So if you look at just operating profit, they actually make operating profit. If you just look at the electricity cost to run these things versus the amount that people pay in subscription fees, they're actually profitable. But they keep making new models, and it's this insanely giant cost to improve and make new models and stuff like that. And so now often that's a fixed cost that you only take like once, right? And then you're good. After that, you're done. Fixed cost done. But what if so here's two situations. Situation number one, progress continues in AI, right? Just keeps getting better, and you keep having to make the next model every year. Is that really a fixed cost? It never ends. Okay, it's an operating cost. And at that point, you never become profitable. OpenAI is never profitable. Anthropic's never profitable if you just have to keep doing that forever. Okay, well, progress eventually slows down, and then we just sort of stop, and then our fixed cost, we're done paying the fixed cost. But then your competitors catch up, and DeepSeek catches up, or whatever, right? And then people can use DeepSeek, and then the price war happens. Then everybody cuts price. And where does that end? What's the floor under which you can't cut price? So for cars, this turned out to be brand loyalty and constant variety. Cars come out with constant new models. So people are like, wow, I got the new this and this. You've got the old this and this. So it turns out that was incredibly important. Personal taste and variety. Oh, I've got a maroon car. It's so exotic. Anyway, it turns out people love that. But it was really a question for a long time whether or not car makers could make any profit. They found a way, and people love their Ford F-150s, right? They have brand loyalty. So they ended up making profit, but it's still a brutally cyclical industry with lots of investment required. What is going to be it for AI? Will the models be differentiated enough that they'll be able to have brand value? Well, I'll be able to tell I'm talking to GPT instead of Claude. Like, right. Is there a network effect there at all? Is there a lock-in effect? Is there anything? Does this thing have brand loyalty? Like consumer AI, it would have to feel different. Cars look different. You can immediately get the difference of a car just by looking at it, drive it. It's different, right? But for AI, like if you switched out Claude and GPT and didn't tell me, like how long would it be before I even realized I was using something else?
Yeah. It is. These are all good points. These are all the sort of bear case for sort of the durability of these platforms. The bull
Profits.
case is, yeah. For the profits of these platforms, it's a good question. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it is just crazy, just the growth. OpenAI is like the 5th biggest website in the world, 800 million weekly actives. The usage is just off the charts.
It's off the charts. Everyone has it.
Yeah.
But the usage of food is universal. Right? The usage of food is 100%. And yet farming is a brutal business. The use of air travel. How many people fly an air, like half of all people or more every year?
Well, you're right. I think there's a question of what is the moat? Is it brand? Is it data network effect? I.e., the product knowing more about you and thus you building a relationship with it, and you don't want to switch. Yeah, how high will the switching costs be? And if they're low, obviously, low profits. If they're high, like Apple or something, then lots of profits. It probably won't be like Apple, obviously, but I think there's something. I'm seeing it in the data side personally. And I think a lot of people just brand, like they discovered it's kind of like Google. If Bing was as good as Google, would you still switch to Bing? Because like you just know about Google. The first thing you think about is Google. You're just going to keep going to Google. I get the fact counter of that is, yeah, but how much are you willing to pay? Right now, Google's free, So are you?
But Google has a network effect from the ads,
Right, that's true.
and so like, yeah, that's why it's. I mean, Bing never came close to being anywhere as useful as Google.
Right.
Like it was instantly recognized as crap. And then
Well,
and
OpenAI
Google
can do ads too. They keep alluding to it. Well, reading
who?
tea leaves, like reading you when we interviewed Sam, and a bunch of people interviewed Sam,
Oh,
and we're like,
OpenAI is going to run ads. Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
yeah, that's a prediction.
Okay. Yeah, but the question is, do you have a network effect with ads? Does running a bunch of ads make OpenAI better? Because you're searching for stuff to buy.
Right.
And that's why ads make it better, because ads help you understand how people search.
Right.
Yeah,
it's
unfair. I mean, like you could advertise on Bing and Google, like there's not exclusive, but yeah. But then with AI, why does having ads on OpenAI make me want to use OpenAI more? You had ads with newspapers, and then they had local monopolies because it was hard to deliver all the newspapers. So you had this essentially a trucking monopoly. Like you had that. Why why does now running ads is it's another way to monetize, but I don't understand why it's another way to it's a greater route to profitability, because I think you can have price wars there too.
Yeah.
So I mean, good to have multiple business models, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Every small business owner faces the brutal trade-off. Spend time on financial admin or spend it growing your business. You can't do both well. That's the problem Found solves. You're probably losing hours every week keeping your books straight. That's economically inefficient, using your most valuable resource on tasks that don't move the needle. Found changes that equation. Found automates expense categorization, identifies tax write-offs automatically, and makes invoice management seamless. All that time can go toward growth. Best part? No hidden fees, no minimums. Just smart banking for modern businesses. Oh, and by the way, other small businesses are loving Found too. This Found user said, Found is going to save me so much headache. It makes everything so much easier. Expenses, income, profits, taxes, invoices even. And Found has 30,000 five-star reviews just like this. Open a Found account for free at found.com/econ102. Found is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services are provided by Lead Bank member FDIC. Don't put this one off. Join thousands of small business owners who have streamlined their finances with Found.
I want to segue to another article you wrote, which was about what's happening in trade.
Yeah.
And you called it the U.S. can win or you're basically saying the U.S. can win the trade war, but we're kind of choosing not to. We're choosing to retreat. Why don't you sort of unpack what's for people who have been following what's going on there, and then we can talk about your recommendations.
So what's happening here is that China is basically trying to cut not just America but other industrialized countries in general off from materials called rare earths, which are not actually that rare, but they're used in like small amounts in things like batteries and various other stuff, motors, magnets. They're used in magnets, and they're used in other stuff too, certain kinds of transistors. And then there's some stuff that's not technically a rare earth, but that is similar, like gallium, I think. And so these critical minerals, China controls a majority of the mining and a super majority of the refining. I spent a very long time reading about that. I spent days and days reading about how this works. And so here's how it works. So you take big machines, you grab rock out of the you grab ore out of the ground. Ore is rock mixed with bits of metal. You crush it. Then you dump chemicals on it so that the stuff you want and a whole bunch of stuff you don't want also comes out of the rock, right? You want to get that stuff and turn it into a metal, but instead you dissolve the rock, right? Now you've got a solution, liquid, with all these different things. The thing you want, let's say it's like neodymium. You want some neodymium. You've got neodymium ions floating around in your solution, and then you've got all this other stuff too. Some other rare earths that you do want, but you don't want them in the same place, right? And then some crap that you just absolutely do not want. Or maybe that you do want, maybe eventually you can use it for something else, but you don't want all these things mixed together. You don't want all these things in the same place. So then how do you separate them? Well, these ions have similar mass and similar charge. So it's really hard to do it. So sometimes you use a special chemical to fish it out, like a chemical that only bonds to one of these things and not to the other to like fish it out. Or sometimes you use extremely sensitive instruments to exploit small differences in like mass, right? So, but it's really hard, and that's called solvent extraction. Then once you have your isolated solvent, your isolated like rare earth, then you turn it into metal, and that's actually pretty easy. So mine it, crush it up, dissolve it, separate it, turn it into metal. Usually we think about mining when we think about like independence in rare earths, right? We think about like, oh, mine it out of the ground. China does like something like 60% of the mining of the rare earths, but that's only 60%. Actually, we can mine stuff in Australia. We have plenty of deposits. And people are like, oh, China has all the reserves. Reserves are just called like places where I know it is because I looked for it. The more mining you do, the more reserves you get. We have plenty of rare earths in the ground. And as long as we're willing to do the approval process for mines, as long as we're willing to override our environmentalist stuff and do the approval process, we can get as many mines as we want. Not a problem. Okay? It's only a problem in terms of our own laws getting in our way. It's a regulatory problem. Most people, when they think about rare earth independence, stop there. They're like, okay, screw these environmental regulations. Let's just deregulate and build some mines, and then we're good. But no, you're not good because you still have to do that solvent extraction step. And that turns out to be really hard. It's a very difficult process to do at scale. I mean, I could do it. You could get some smart guys and do it in a lab at a very small scale. But to do this on the kind of industrial, super efficient, super cheap industrial scale required to produce all these things is really, really, really hard. And so in the 1980s, China said, we'll do this for you. And we said, okay, let's do it. It's also incredibly polluting. If you think mines are polluting, you should see refineries. Refineries pollute so much more because mines, yes, you have some chemicals you need to extract. You have some radioactive shit in the ore, but like it's, ultimately it's far away from people. And then you can like, there's a lot of techniques you can use to mitigate it, and it doesn't necessarily run off. Refineries intentionally dump a bunch of toxic chemicals designed to like dissolve shit and, react with stuff. You dump all these chemicals over stuff, and then you have this massive amounts of industrial runoff of chemicals from refining, super polluting. So that's a problem. But then also China knows how to do this and we don't. Here's what I really want to say here. There is a thing that China knows how to do that we don't, which is the solvent extraction step. Because China's been doing it since the 80s and we don't do it anymore. China has a technology we don't have, which is solvent extraction. We just don't know how to do that. So what do? Well, we can basically try to steal it from China, which is hard because it's process knowledge, right? It's not like a blueprint. There's not a magic machine that China has that will do solvent extraction. That doesn't exist. I mean, there's a bunch of machines, but like if we copy those machines, it wouldn't work as well for us. It would work like 1% as well for us because there's so many little tips and tricks for how to do this right. It's called distributed tacit knowledge. It's why China can't copy our semiconductor factories or our jet engines because there's a million little tips and tricks, but we can't copy their solvent extraction. We're going to have to reinvent the wheel here. We're going to have to go find a whole bunch of really smart scientists and say, figure out new, better ways to do solvent extraction and then scale them. And that's going to take years and it's going to be hard, but we can do it. We just have to be willing to do it.
And why wouldn't we be willing to do it? Just because is it that we haven't identified it's the right problem, or what's your kind of recommendation to, or why aren't we sort of taking the right steps here, would you say?
Well, one thing is because every time that we gear up to make this massive effort, China's like, okay, well, we'll suspend our export controls for like a month or something. And everybody just hopes the problem will go away and we'll never have to do this because it's a hard problem to solve. It's expensive. It's polluting. So there's going to be political fights over it. It requires long-term commitment. And it requires, a lot of things we're not used to doing. It requires like lots of compromises, lots of stuff. And we just wish it would go away and we could just rely on China for this thing we've always relied on them for.
Yeah.
The precedent here is oil, right? It was actually really, really hard to figure out how to frack oil out of the ground. All our oil tends to be in shale rock, whereas their oil tends to be under these sand, right? We had to figure out how to get our oil out, and it took us 40 years to do that.
Yeah.
We invested in fracking technology. We need to be doing the same thing for rare earths right now. It will take us some time. It won't take us 40 years. We can probably do it.
What are your thoughts on export, or latest thoughts on export controls in particular?
Our export controls are working. It's massively hurting China's semiconductor industry. So we should still do it. We should not let China's threats threaten us.
Is the bear case for them that it makes China, it subsidizes their own sort of catching up?
It doesn't subsidize it.
Got it.
The idea that we can maintain, that we can keep China hooked on our stuff, on our components, on our semiconductors for forever was always a little bit silly because China has been running flat out with spending 5% of GDP on subsidies and stuff to create independence from us for years. And our most effective export controls are on the tools that they would use. Can they replicate these tools? Yeah, given a very long time, by which time we'll be on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Export controls work. China was already trying as hard as it could to catch up. And that's made in China 2025 and now whatever the next plan is.
Yeah.
Because it's 2025. And so China China caught up in a lot of stuff, right? China caught up in machine tools and robotics. China caught up in so many things that it doesn't, China can make great screens now. China can make great memory chips now. It doesn't need South Korean memory chips. Germany used to sell all these machine tools to China. And for like the whole 2010s, Germany just made incredible export earnings selling machine tools to China. Then, thanks to Made in China 2025, China caught up in the manufacture of machine tools. Now Germany is at a deficit with China.
Yeah.
So the idea that we were going to hook China on our chips forever, but simply by not doing export controls and they were going to like never catch up is wrong. And so if Jensen Huang says that that's what we were going to do, he's just feeding you a line.
Yeah. Let's spend the last section on one of your other recent posts on China, where you sort of go through the few bear cases or existential risks that people pose, or believe are risks for China, like the demographic situation, the microeconomic situation, the macroeconomic situation. And you sort of say, hey, they might slow China down in certain ways, but they don't really pose existential risks in the way that people are concerned about. Why don't you walk through them, particularly, the microeconomic and the macroeconomic, for people less familiar to better understand the concerns there?
So demographically, China is a bit screwed in the long term, as are most rich nations, but China's a bit more screwed than others. China's fertility is lower than Japan's, lower than Europe's. It's really low. I think only South Korea is lower. And so that's going to really screw China at some point, unless we invent magic robots that just replace all the humans. Then all bets are off. But then, China then has mass unemployment, and then they have to worry about every single human in China losing their jobs, and then you have mass rebellion, and then everyone has to worry about that, right? Ironically, maybe countries with more legal barriers to AI deployment at that time will have less political unrest because they won't have all the people losing their jobs. But right now, that's sci-fi. And so right now, humans still matter, and you still need a lot of humans. And when you have all the people in charge of every company are old, they're old. They don't know. They don't understand like new technologies and new business models as much. And so China will age very rapidly. However, China has a baby bulge coming through the pipeline right now. It's aged about 7 to 22 right now. So you could call it China's Gen Alpha, maybe. It doesn't quite line up with our generations, but it's Gen Alpha, sort of. And so China's Gen Alpha is going to be a big generation, bigger than their like Gen Z, right? Bigger than their Zoomers. And you're going to see, so China's working age population increased last year. It will increase this year. It will increase next year. And then in 2027, it'll peak and it'll begin to decrease. But the rapid decrease won't start until the 2030s. And so China's got a few years here. And it's got until mid-century before the demographic situation becomes as serious as it now is in like Japan or wherever. So China's got a lot of runtime here. They've got 20 to 25 years of runtime, I'd say, before they really start experiencing negative consequences. That's a long way away, man. We could have AGI in that time.
Yeah. Got it. So, okay. So the demographics are less of a concern in the short to medium term, and in long term, hey, everyone's in a tough spot.
Exactly.
Okay. Now maybe when you walk through some of the micro and macro concerns that people tend to talk about and why they're less existential.
Right. So, the big macroeconomic problem in China is the real estate bust. All these loans went bad. And so they said, okay, well, instead we're gonna keep the economy afloat by telling banks to start making a ton of loans to manufacturers. Immediately, a bunch of real estate people came and pretended to be manufacturers and took out 1 million loans. That has now been curbed. But that's what happened initially. But they did actually end up making a bunch of loans to manufacturers. Here's the problem. The state told them what industries to put those loans in, like electric cars. Basically, China has like 100 electric car companies, and you if you say, hey, I'm an electric car company from the Zhejiang province, or like Hefei province or wherever, you get a loan. Here's some loans, and on top of that, government subsidies and tax credits on top of your loans. But you have massive loans, right? And what do? You make electric cars. You're like, yippee, I build a factory. I build some cars. And then all the other 100 companies are building cars. And then BYD is like, hey guys, we got the best cars. And the other people are like, well, we just stole your IP. Because remember how China steals all that IP from us? They do it 10 times worse to each other. And so everybody's got BYD's IP, and BYD has like slight quality advantage because it can like, continuously innovate, and because it can like, some of its knowledge is tacit knowledge. But like, honestly, electric cars are not that hard to make pretty good. And so like all these other cars are like 95% as good as a BYD, and you can get it for much less of the price. And they're just like taking out loans, subsidies. And they're just producing cars. And their profits go away, man. Like the profits go poof. And so Japan had this problem briefly in like the late 1960s and early 1970s. It was called kato kyoso, which is over competition, excessive competition. China calls it involution, or neijuan, which I'm pronouncing wrong. I can pronounce Japanese things. I cannot pronounce Chinese things. But neijuan, or involution, is the name that China applies to this phenomenon. But it's really bad. It's like it's just destroying profit in China. Industrial profits are just cratering. And then you have companies that don't have the profit cushion to be able to innovate for the future on their own. And the government can try paying them to innovate, but a lot of that ends up just paying them to produce more cars when you think you're paying them to innovate. So it's a hard problem to solve. And then also they don't have profits. So basically like capital is being misallocated on a grand scale. Like just like with ghost cities or apartments that never get built or whatever, you're getting cars that nobody needs, a sea of rusting metal and plastic and batteries. And you have this sea of crap that nobody needs, which, by the way, is environmentally quite toxic. But maybe someday China will care about that as much as they should. But then anyway, you have seas of cars no one uses, and like this massive glut is competing profits down, and so you're just destroying value in your economy. And so what do? So they could cut off subsidies. So what you're supposed to do here, by the way, the playbook you're supposed to do is do temporary subsidies, find out who your national champions are, then remove subsidies so the national champions can consolidate and get scale, right? BYD needs to be eating dozens of these other car companies and firing 80% of the workers at each of these. What happens then? People get mad. Because remember, there's a million car companies. Each province has its own champion. So we talk about national champions. China has provincial champions. And so, what if Guizhou province gets screwed while, Tianjin gets, or Shenzhen or whatever, get like all the money from this boom? Everyone will think the government did it because everyone thinks, not without cause, that the Chinese government makes all economic decisions in the country. So everyone's going to get really mad. They're like, why didn't my electric car company make it? Why did you choose these guys over us? It's like, because they're 2% more efficient, and so they'll be the national champions. We've got to have export discipline, guys. Here's a copy of how Asia works. No, rakes and pitchforks, rah! Like there's our cold open. I don't know. So then people get mad, and this wasn't a problem in Japan, because in Japan everybody was in Tokyo and Osaka, right? You had too many television companies in Japan, but they were all in Tokyo and Osaka, and so you could cull them and consolidate them without that much people rioting. But in China, you're going to hurt whole regions, and then people are going to riot, and then. Yeah, so it's very hard to do the thing where you cut off subsidies and like find out who the national champions are, which you're supposed to do. It's called discipline in the industrial policy literature. So they're in a pickle, but if they keep the subsidies going, they're getting like deflation. Oh, by the way, there's another piece of this, which is deflation. So deflation is when prices go down, and then wages go down, and then incomes go down, and tax revenues go down in nominal terms. Prices go down, things are getting cheaper, but your wages are going down, so it's not great, right? So then that's called deflation, and if you just produce too much stuff, you get deflation because the price of everything just crashes, right? So they're getting that. What does deflation do? It also makes debt worse, because back in the real estate bubble days, all these Chinese companies and households and banks and all these people agreed to pay back a certain amount of yuan at a certain time. Now the number of yuan in the economy is dwindling because of deflation. So it gets getting, even if your real income stays steady or even grow, it's getting harder and harder to pay back those loans because they were fixed in nominal terms of absolute number of yuan. And so there's less and less yuan because of deflation. And so the industrial loan problem is making the real estate problem worse, even as it threatens to add another giant loan blorf on top of the previous loan blorf pile of loans. A new pile of crappy loans, even as deflation from producing too much stuff is making it harder to pay back all of these loans, the new ones and the old ones. And so China's in a pickle. It needs to end a lot of this industrial policy and bank loans. It needs to end Neijuan. It needs to end over competition. But it can't, because then everybody gets mad. The provinces get mad. Unemployment goes up. But if they keep it going, they get deflation. Debts get harder to pay, and the economy slows more. So I guess expect the Chinese economy to slow more.
And if you've already given some, but if you were, and we'll close on this, what other recommendations would you give purely on the economic perspective to sort of have as much growth as possible given the constraints and opportunities?
To China?
Yeah.
I don't know, because political constraints I don't understand well enough to really give good advice. But I'd say you've got to end this flood of subsidies and cheap bank loans, do what Japan did, rationalize their economy. And then people will be happier.
Rationalize the economy.
Yep, that's right. Allow the champions to eat everybody else.
Yeah.
But maybe political constraints stop them from doing it, but it's what they need to do. Accept a period of lower growth while you're just consolidate your economy. Have five electric car companies instead of 100.
Right.
That's it.
Cool. We're at time. I want to be mindful, but this is a great conversation on AI, trade, China. Econ 102 is never left. Don't let anyone tell you differently, dear listener.
We're still here.
Yeah. So stay tuned for more. As always, Noah, great conversation. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Econ 102. If you liked this episode, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, leave us a rating or review, and share it with your friends and family. For more episodes, go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and follow us on X at Erik Torenberg and at No Opinion. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.